Two experts with us tonight to discuss Russia's military action.
We're joined by KTVU political analyst Brian Sobel, as well as Stephen Zunez, a professor of politics and international studies at USF. Professor Zunez, let's start with you about the situation that is unfolding on the ground tonight. Explosions being heard in the capital city of Kyiv, as we just heard, as well as across the country. Ukraine's foreign minister describing this as a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. What is your sense about the scope of Russia's military operation and how the conflict is likely to play out in the coming days?
It's pretty massive, as many of us feared. We're not just talking about clashes along the Russian-occupied areas in the east with the breakaway republics. We're talking about all over the country, hitting airports, hitting military facilities. Of particular concern is there appears to be movement of troops from the north, both Russian and Belarusian troops crossing that border, which is actually not far from Kyiv. And so, there's actually a risk there may be some kind of assault on the capital, as well as movements in the Donbas region beyond the areas of these breakaway republics.
Brian, let's go to you. President Biden will address the nation tomorrow. What's the message he wants to send to the American people and to the world now that Putin has gone ahead and launched an invasion of Ukraine?
Julie, he's going to talk at length about additional sanctions that will be put on Russia. The problem with the sanctions is that sanctions take time to work. And this has been a plan by Vladimir Putin for a long time. He amassed troops on three sides of Ukraine, and he's now rolling through his plan. So whatever sanctions we put on will not have an immediate effect, even if we go after, say, the personal assets of the oligarchs, including Vladimir Putin. This is something that's been planned for by the Russians for quite some time.
Professor Zunez, Putin has said that the goal of this military operation that we are seeing tonight was the demilitarization of Ukraine. Can you talk a little bit more about how Putin has really tried to frame this as a defensive military conflict? What is the pretext that he's given to try to justify this attack?
The mythology, it kind of reminds me of the supposed weapons of mass destruction that we used to defend ourselves from when the U.S. invaded Iraq. It is ludicrous. Basically, the line of reasoning is that these breakaway republics that the Kremlin recognize, they're seen as separate nations, and therefore any Ukrainian military activity to attempt to reclaim any of their territory is therefore an aggressive act against these supposedly independent republics. And this despite the fact that the Ukrainians have shown remarkable restraint in recent weeks, despite the Kremlin's provocations. And so basically what the Russians are trying to say now is that because of the supposed threat and these supposed assaults on civilians in these breakaway regions, which again have not been happening in recent times, that therefore they have the right to demilitarize Ukraine. Most of these explosions we've been seeing and hearing outside of the major cities have been on air bases. They're trying to destroy as much of the both planes on the ground as well as fueling and other supplies, and likely there'll be other military targets as well. Unfortunately, they haven't started bombing the cities themselves, but this is a major military operation that with the goal of crippling the Ukrainian armed forces.
With a little bit more on this point, Professor Zunez, 180,000 Russian troops stationed around parts of Ukraine. We're talking about massive forces. We're seeing the air attack now, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. How long before we see a land attack follow? And are the Ukrainian people any match against the Russian forces? I mean, do they have the means to mount any real type of defense in their own cities?
Not enough to hold off a full-scale invasion. More limited incursions, which we're getting to already see. There could be some effective resistance. if the Russians do end up actually occupying parts of the territory, there'll be likely guerrilla warfare. There'll also likely be massive nonviolent resistance, massive non-cooperation, because one thing about an occupation, you may physically hold the territory, but if people refuse to cooperate, refuse to go to work, refuse to assist, that can actually weaken your hold on the territory as well. The main deterrent, again, is the economic issues. I'm a little more optimistic than my guest about the impact. We've already seen the value of the ruble plummet. We've seen that the Moscow stock market has shut down because of mass selling. The resistance to this kind of aggression, we can't rely purely on military means alone. The Ukrainians can't do it. Other countries aren't going to come to the rescue. It's going to have to be a multi-pronged attack to on the Russian government, which will be really the only hope we have to stop this aggression.
And President Biden, as we know, Brian, to you, the president has made it clear that he does not want and does not intend to have U.S. forces directly involved in this conflict fighting in Ukraine. How do you see him going about reassuring Americans when he addresses the nation tomorrow that we do not want to get directly involved in this conflict, that we will support Ukraine in other ways?
Alex, that's exactly what he has to say, and he has to reiterate it because the consequences of Americans fighting Russians is a whole other specter to this thing. Again, with respect to sanctions, all well and good, except for the Russians have been thinking about this operation for a long time. We've talked about on the western side of the world cutting off banking and other things, all well and good. They have a giant bank with their new best friends in China. And this is not unanticipated by the Russians. They have gamed this very well. And frankly, as a student of military history and having written about military history for 30 years, I can tell you this looks a heck of a lot like the battle plan of Adolf Hitler and what he did with Czechoslovakia, then into Poland, and then the consequence of that was a world war. So the key here is to contain this to Ukraine, and hopefully Putin will, at some point, whether it's through sanctions or other means, decide he needs to pull back or that he's accomplished his goal, which is regime change in Ukraine. He wants a favorable government to Russia, and that's the goal here.
All right. Well, certainly some troubling developments that we are seeing play out tonight in Ukraine. Appreciate both of you coming on tonight to give us some context and perspective. That's our political analyst, Brian Sobel, and Professor Stephen Zunes from USF.